Brachim Habayim, and welcome. My name is Wayne Firestone. On behalf of all my colleagues at the America-Israel Friendship League, thanks for joining with us today for a continuation of our extended webinar series, which we commenced just a couple days after October 7th in this horrible war and nightmare that our Israeli friends and colleagues have been living with. We are indeed grateful and in recognition that this community too has really sort of stuck with us and demonstrated unbelievable support and a desire to learn more, know more, find new ways to help. We're grateful to have you as part of our extended community during these very, very difficult times. I usually begin our segments by asking a question to sort of check in and have a community building moment from our global audience around the world. And I want to acknowledge and recognize that for many of you, for many of us, just following what's happening to our friends and loved ones is itself anxiety inducing and has been extremely stressful for many of us, many sleepless nights, nothing that compares to what Israelis are going through, but I really do want to acknowledge that as well. And so if in addition to people checking in, we have people checking in from Israel, people checking in from Ottawa, from places around the world, I also wanted to see if you would be willing to put something in the chat about what it is that you're doing to help cope with your own stress during these very challenging and dark days. So sometimes we can learn from experts and sometimes we can learn from each other in a learning community. And I do want to recognize that we have to all take care of ourselves. We have to take care of our friends and loved ones, but it begins with taking care of ourselves. So if you have any advice or suggestions about the things that are helping you de-stress a little bit and be less anxious during these moments, please do let us know. We are indeed honored today and privileged to have a group from the organization NATAL who is on the front lines of a different kind of war, a different aspect of this war, which is the mental health and trauma that is being experienced by many people, both individually and collectively. And we will be talking about both of those phenomenon as it relates to very specific groups of people who have been affected by the war, as well as collectively, really an entire nation that is experiencing this in real time. And with social media and the media images we've seen have for better or for worse, L'Tov or L'Ra, have actually seen some of the carnage and indeed terror that is at the very front of this unprecedented attack. So let me just briefly introduce to you the panelists so you know a little bit who we're going to be talking about. We're going to be as informal as we can to hear their perspectives first as professionals, but then to engage in a discussion with them. Emi Palmar is the chairperson of NATAL. She's an Israeli lawyer with a distinguished career over 24 years as a civil servant in Israel. I want to point out she was the Director General of the Ministry of Justice between 2014 and 2019. She's been the chairperson for numerous public committees that have dealt with very sensitive topics. Over the years, I want to point out just one or two that dealt with locating missing IDF soldiers, as well as negotiating the exchange with the Palestinian Authority for prisoners in return for the prisoner of war, Gilad Shalit. So she brings a lot of professional background to her chair position. She's joined by Professor Rivka Tuval Mashiach, who is a clinical psychologist and a faculty member, also the chair of the gender graduate program at Bar Ilan University. She works at Hadassah Medical Center in Jerusalem, has worked with terror victims and trauma survivors in Israel, but also, interestingly, from her background, has worked with an American NGO, Patton's Veteran Project, which works with U.S. veterans and has some unique approaches to dealing with their trauma. We also have Mayan Aviv, the Executive Director of American Friends of Natal. She's based now and joining us from New Jersey. She previously worked with Alin Hospital, a leading pediatric rehabilitation center in Jerusalem. And we're grateful to have all three of our panelists here with a great deal of knowledge about how the Israeli system, both the healthcare system and the mental health care services that are provided, where that falls on. And indeed, for many of us, certainly on this webinar series where we've already done programming with Natal prior to the war, we have a great deal of appreciation for very specific challenges that Israeli society, I wish this wasn't the case, has world leading expertise as a result of some of the extraordinary circumstances that Israelis live in, with the reservist army and with citizens being called up to do things with very short notice and in order to serve and defend their country. So, Emmy, let me begin with you with a bit of your perspective on how you, as the chair of Natal, relate to the current situation since October 7th, and what you're seeing this represent, really, indeed, for Israeli society.
Okay, so good evening and hello, everyone. It's evening in Israel, so this is my choice of words. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all and appreciate the interest in what is going on in Israel. I think that every one of us has to introduce themselves right now in terms of where am I in the middle of this crisis? So just the personal thing. I am a mother of two. My son Nimrod is doing his PhD actually on post-trauma in Cambridge, UK. He's already 32 years old, and he decided to come back and join the reserve service in spite of the fact that he could have stayed in the UK, and he joined a team that is looking for missing people still 3 weeks after the events. They're looking into the villages, the burnt villages next to kibbutzim, next to Gaza, trying to look for the whatever is left that could maybe give a sign that somebody was there and was not identified yet. So you can imagine the thoughts and the experiences that he's experiencing right now. My daughter, who's 28, just buried two of her friends who were participating in the music festival where the biggest massacre took place. Both of them were missing for very long days until they were found and recognized dead. And her boyfriend has just entered Gaza last night because he's also a reserve officer. This is on top of being the daughter of a mother who's 90 years old and a survivor of the Holocaust. She was a child in a concentration camp. She had a wonderful life till now and very strong in her spirit. She is truly depressed like I've never seen her before, both because of the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe, which reminds her of her childhood, and basically because of the loss of the security that we all had being Jewish in Israel and believing that this is, it's not the safest place on earth, generally speaking, but it is a safe haven for us. So sorry for this lengthy beginning, but it's very relevant to everything that Natal is doing, because you have to understand that even the people who are trying to deal with trauma in Israel, each and every one of us have our own challenges in our private lives and the things that affect the way that we, wake up in the morning and try to do our best. Natal was established 26 years ago after another big surprise that Israel has experienced, which was the Yom Kippur War. Yudi Rekanati, a very outstanding philanthropist in Israel, decided after 25 years after the war and after a rise in terrorist attacks in the 90s, that it's about time that the Israeli society will address the fact that people are suffering with trauma and post-trauma in Israel, especially what she called a national trauma from war and from terror, something which is not only a personal experience, but is a collective experience. And for those of you who are so close to us and experiencing the same type of shock, fear, anger, worry, I think I don't have to waste a lot of time in trying to explain what a collective trauma is. So Natal started with establishing helplines that can enable anyone 24/7 to call and to be supported by volunteers that we train and that are supported themselves by social workers, therapists, and psychiatrists. And if in a regular year we have 24,000 calls, I can tell you that for the past 3 weeks, Natal helplines have received already 12,000 calls. It's an unbelievable number. Actually, Natal, who functions 24/7, received the first call on Saturday morning, 6:30, when the missiles attack started, which is something very common in Natal. We know how to move quickly from a routine to emergency. We thought it's going to be only missiles, but very quickly our volunteers started to receive calls from people in their safe rooms, in their shelters. People who live nearby Gaza and have known Natal because of the previous missiles attacks knew the number and called us for help, called us to deal with, the immediate fear, the immediate questions about what to do with the children. But along the day, we realized that it's much more than that. Other than helplines, Natal immediately on the same night of the 26th had a webinar for parents who had the most difficult questions about how to answer the questions of their children. I don't know if you remember that Saturday, because it's a bit, difficult to remind ourselves of how surprised we were every hour by the hour. But the parents at 8:00 in the evening already felt that the children are exposed to unbelievable stories, unbelievable pictures. Online videos were streaming already what happened during that day. And Natal had 4 therapists online answering questions, dealing with the chats. And by the way, we had to have 4 of them because they live in different parts of the country, and missiles attacks were taking down at every other 15 minutes. I participated because I was curious also to hear the answers. People were unable to continue because they had to go to their own shelter. And this is how it's been going on ever since. Natal is supporting people in Israel all year round through helplines, through clinical treatment. People who call the helpline have 2 possibilities. One of them is to just receive 1 call, 1 conversation that can last 30 minutes or maybe more sometimes. It depends on how busy we are. Other people can ask the volunteer to reach out and call them every week at the same time, at the same hour, and establish a relationship through the helplines. And some people want to stay like this for years and have an anonymous relationship, but others ask to be referred to the clinical unit. And in the clinical unit, we have about 200 therapists across the country who are capable of giving people, wherever they live, the opportunity of clinical support. But other than that, Natal has been for 3 weeks on the ground. We are doing, I think, maybe the most crucial work right now in supporting the helpers. Helping the helpers is one of the major tasks of Natal. I will let Professor Rivka Tuval-Mashiach speak a little bit more about the professional aspects of the knowledge that has been developed in Natal in terms of trauma, in emergency intervention, trauma from war and from terror. But a very important subject that Natal is acknowledging whenever it is possible is to help the helpers. People who are exposed directly to trauma, to traumatized people, to traumatized populations, suffer themselves from could suffer themselves from trauma and develop symptoms. And we understand that in the long term, supporting the social workers, supporting the medical staff, supporting the policemen, supporting the people who had to identify 1,400 bodies. And we know, unfortunately, that not only it was a unprecedented number, the condition of the bodies and the atrocities that the people were exposed to were extremely shocking and extremely difficult for the people who had to do that, including soldiers who just happened to be in the area and serve in the area on this day and the following day, and they had to help out doing this without any preparation, without any mental resiliency that could even, help them pass one day in that horrific task. So Natal has like an ecosystem that goes from, routine everyday life, where we give support to veterans of the army, to people who previously went through terror attacks, to emergency. Emergency does two things. First of all, it brings new people into Natal, but unfortunately in Israel, it also brings the people who are already suffering from PTSD, and whatever is happening is triggering them. Either it's the missiles, the sound of the missiles, the fear from the missiles, or, the memories, the exposure to stories, the exposure to the horrors of being a soldier or to having to fight or to being under a shooting attack. All of these things bring back a lot of memories and a lot of symptoms. And Natal's helplines and other services are the go-to in Israel of people suffering from these things. Wayne, I see you nodding and maybe wanting to ask a question,
well,
maybe passing it to Rivka.
We'll pass to Rivka, but I do want to acknowledge and appreciate your sharing your own familial connection in both generational directions. And
absolutely,
we haven't even yet begun to unpack what this means to a Holocaust survivor, seeing these kind of images and the fears that it raises. So I greatly appreciate that, and I greatly appreciate the measured approach that this is the way Natal has needed to respond to this crisis. Requires a infrastructure that is spread throughout the country, that is largely 24/7, and that is adaptable to the situation.
I'll just say a word about this, because our capability of expanding immediately and training new people to get into our services is really, I think, the most amazing an important thing that Natal has been doing. But just to follow, before you're passing it to Rivka, to what you said about the two generations that I'm surrounded with, and the fact that we're still trying to figure it out, that the people who deal with resilience in Natal always mention two important things in order to rebuild our resilience. And it is faith in the security of what is surrounding us, and the other is optimism. And I think that the big crisis on Saturday night was the loss of faith in, our capability to protect ourselves. And the second is, I think, a true unknown feeling of pessimism that many Israelis experienced, understanding what is going to happen next and the way the reality looks like. So we have recovered a little bit from that ever since, but this is a very, very shocking, reality, where you understand that the basic things that you can hold on are completely disrupted.
Professor Tuval Mashiach, I don't know if we have a measure yet for optimism, certainly in this immediate crisis. It may be a little too early to tell, but from your perspective, maybe you could also share a little bit about where and how you're coming at this, and what you see as the initial priorities that NATAL has to address.
Okay. So maybe like Amy started, I'll start with my personal context. I'm a mother of 4. My 2 sons are now in the military. one in the reserves. He's in Gush Etzion. And my youngest son is in Gaza right now. He is a parachute. And I think aside of the personal emotions that it evokes in me, it really relates to what Emmy spoke about, that we cannot fully understand the impact that this trauma has on us if we don't understand that we treat what we are part of. Now, it may be easier for all of you to understand that had I been treating, and I had been treating American veterans, this would be a topic that I'm an expert on. I know about military trauma, but this would not be my personal story, okay? I would have been able to develop this distance that you need in order to be able to effectively treat someone, because it's not necessarily or specifically your own history, your own military, your own context. What happens to all therapists and all service providers in Israel is that we are all sharing what has been termed professionally as shared reality. Okay, we all share the same reality. We have to take care of people in need while we're at the same time experiencing the same need. We're all exposed to missiles, depending on where we live in Israel, but all of us are exposed to missiles. The majority of us have either partners or sons or fathers who now actively serve in the military. And the majority of us, because Israel is such a small country, know people who have already been killed or have been kidnapped and are now hostages. So it makes everything very complicated because we are part of what we're trying to take care of. Okay, so that's where we start. Now, on the one hand, it gives us a hands-on knowledge of what we know. I know how I feel. It makes it much easier for me to understand the experience of a mother of a soldier who is now very anxious. Okay, I know how she feels. But at the same time, it makes it much more risky for us because we're prone to what has been termed as secondary traumatization, because her trauma is affecting me because of the shared reality that we are facing together. So that's just the introduction of to show how complicated it is, that the situation is really affecting us all. Now, it leads me to the main point that I want to emphasize. NATAL, for the last 26 years, treats individuals who come after they serve in the military or were exposed to terror attacks. And everybody gets the treatment that they need. But usually it's an individual trauma. Not every trauma that we treat is falling under what we call a national trauma or a collective trauma. If someone was at Dizengoff a few months ago and he happened to be there when the terrorist attack happened, so he can get the treatment, but it's not a collective trauma. There are certain things that are required in order to really term a trauma or traumatic event a national trauma. And part of it relates to what I just described. When everybody shares the same reality, it becomes a much more collective event. But there are a few other aspects that I want to mention that make it really a collective trauma. And I think it'll be easier, at least for those of you who live in the US, to think about the 9/11 event. The 9/11, the Twins collapse, is considered a national trauma. People could have been in San Diego, in California, and watch it in the TV and still feel that America is in danger and feel as if they are there, although they knew no one in the buildings who died at that day. What is really defining a national trauma is the feeling of a group, of a collective group, that this group or this nation or the country is in danger. And that's what we all felt on this Saturday, that Israel is under threat, that Israel's existence is being challenged. And that is a very enormous, a very significant rupture of our belief system in the assumption that we hold that Israel is here and that Israel will be here always, and that we are a strong society and we have a strong military and nothing like that could happen. It all caught us by surprise. Now, really, as a collective, as a society, it reminds us all, at least in Israel, the Yom Kippur War, not only because of the dates that are very similar, but also because of the similarity that in Yom Kippur War, nobody was prepared, exactly as it happened here. Now, the combination of an unexpected event, together with the massacre and the horrible pictures, and together coupled with the media coverage, where it's accessible to everyone, so you could really sit in San Diego and see what happens minutes after it happens, and watch all the videos, and the fact that it has not ended yet. We still have hostages, and we still are under war. So it's not a single event like a terror attack that ends after a few minutes or a few hours. We're still in an ongoing event. All this makes it a national trauma for us.
Maayan, I want to pick up on that theme. And just as the professor was explaining that it's not even your geographic proximity, although we will come back to some of those that are in harm's way now, but the friends of Israel, Israeli families living in different parts of the world, Israeli Americans indeed, are watching this. Some of them are watching it 24/7 from social media and from other things, maybe even becoming obsessively interested and involved because it's available. And so tell us a little bit about how you are seeing and experiencing the war and NATAL's efforts from the other side of the Atlantic at the moment.
So from a personal point of view and discussions with friends, first of all, I live in Bergen County, New Jersey, where there are many Israelis and American Jews. And the feelings that we have are, fear, anxiety, worry, pain, grief, helplessness. Yes, we're not under the immediate threat, but it certainly has extended into our own communities. As Rivka was saying, everybody knows somebody, so it impacted every single person that I know personally in my community. And I can also share that the outreach to American Friends of Natal has been tremendous in both people wanting to learn more, understand more. There's a realization of what Natal has been doing for 26 years and why their ability to continue this work for many years to come is so critical. Whether it be volunteers or people wanting to learn more, or supporters or communities coming together to try to raise awareness and funds for Natal, the outpour of support has been tremendous. And it's instills a sense of solidarity in all of us.
I want to bring the three of you on now together as a panel to relate to a number of phenomenon that we've introduced. First of all, there was a question that's already come in from the audience about why this is why this is being perceived. I thought it was so interesting, the two criteria that you gave for resilience, Emmy, up front. And I think it's not intuitive to some people who are watching this from a distance and seeing, okay, horrible, Israel's in a war, being ostracized, condemned in the media, at the United Nations, etc. That seems to be almost like a Groundhog Day experience. If that it since the Yom Kippur War, since '67 war here, and yet you all have acknowledged that something different happened on October 7th. That this is not being processed as another war, another uprising, another call up, another challenge to Israeli society that requires some kind of sacrifice, individual and collective. So could you speak to why that moment now was so universally recognized in Israel, to the point where people who were politically on opposite sides were not speaking to each other, were protesting each other, calling each other names, you name it, suddenly have put that largely to the side and said, this is an existential moment requiring unity?
Yeah, well, I think this was a very quick switch to existential mode. I mean, survival mode. When you realize the level of exposure to danger, the first thing you do in Israel is to stick together. I think that we have been known for years as a society which is famous for its solidarity. I will refer, to the basic Jewish values of Kol Israel Arivim Ze Lazo. I don't know, maybe you want to translate it to English, but probably the majority knows what I'm talking about. And I think that part of being proud of being Israeli is that it's a very communal society, it's a very warm society, it's a very supportive environment. NATAL is a apolitical NGO, so I don't want to talk politics. I do want to say that everybody understands that the instability that Israel went through for about 4 or 5 years, going from one election to another, being polarized, by the way, like many countries around the world, on social media and other places, were definitely part of our weakness in that moment, and our fear in that moment, and our loss of security in that moment. But like Rivka said, it's an ongoing event. And I remember when I was part of the negotiation team for the release of Gilad Shalit, who was one prisoner. Okay, now it seems like an unbelievable privilege, and the entire Israeli society was engaged, with saving him. The head of the negotiation team, Chagai Adas, used to say to us that this is like an ongoing terrorist attack. It was exactly what Rivka was saying, because he said that in terms of the resiliency of the Israeli society, having one soldier, just imagine, one soldier that we knew that he was kept safe and nobody tortured him. We knew that for a fact, which is the complete opposite right now. And yet, he said the society will never be relieved before he comes back. And every mother, every father that takes their children at the age of 18 to enlist to the army have to know that the Israeli people, and of course the Israeli government, does everything in its power for his return, for his safe return. So now you'll have to, do it in a multiple of 242 abducted people, by the way, citizens of all types in Israel, Arabs, Bedouins, of course, Jews, infants, elderly, sick, healthy. You know what? Just a thought. I mean, thoughts that are evolving as days are going by. I'm thinking of the baby, the 9-month-old baby who is not exposed to daylight. He needs this for his development. It's not like an older person who will stay in a tunnel for a while and can recover from that. I mean, these are thoughts that it takes time, even, just to look at one of them as an individual, as an entire world, like we say in Hebrew. And it's really very difficult. And this is why we have to understand that part of healing the individuals, the classic treatment in the psychologist's room is not enough. It's about restoring what Israel used to be for its citizens. It's about knowing that we did everything in our power for their safe return and that we succeeded. And it is going to take time because we assume that it's extremely difficult. We assume that some of the hostages are not by the hands of the Hamas. And we don't even know a lot about some of the people, and it's just going to make it, and I don't want to say a never-ending story, but a very torturing experience, as we see, by the way, when every other day we receive either a video or a picture or an announcement that has to do with the hostages, which is trying psychologically to hurt and to weaken the Israeli society in every possible aspect. You probably understand that choosing first the 2 women who are holding an American passport is something that tells every Israeli your citizenship is worthless, your government is worthless, and you'd better get a foreign passport if you want to be safe in this world.
Rivka, let's stay on the issue of the hostages for a moment. It's harrowing in to such depth for the families. Can we start there in terms of perhaps the first glimmers of hope with some of the releases and the freeing of an Israeli soldier returned to her family? Is that the beginning for them to feel like optimism could touch their families as well, or is it until they know for sure they're just going to have to experience this terror?
I think the more accurate way to describe their emotional state would be that they oscillate between moments of hope and moments of despair. And every case of release is not even, they are happy for every such release, but it's not 100% hope, because they never know what the price of this release would be, because the Hamas may take other steps because of what happens, right? So they never know if it's a coincidence that someone was released, if the Hamas is going to take extra steps and maybe harm the ones who are left there. It's so uncertain, the situation, that the people that we speak with, they cannot speak about being hopeful for the whole day. They just swing between moments of extreme despair and moments of hope, and it's really an impossible emotional state. But if it's okay, I want to go back to your question before, because I want to add to what Emi said 2 points. I think your question was, why is it such a difficult national trauma? Why is it so difficult this time? And I think trauma becomes much bigger and much more impactful when there are a few conditions that happen, and I want to mention 2 of them. One is that we usually live our lives according to the assumptions that we hold, and one of these assumptions was that the Hamas is Israel's partner. They are controlling Gaza, they get money from Israel, and the fact that they use this money to attack not only the Israeli military, but to attack civilians and to attack babies is a rupture in this narrative that Israelis were building for themselves, that we are on the way to peace with, at least with the Gaza area, and all these conceptions broke. That's one. The second one, which is really poisonous, is that when you watch pure evil and cruelty, it's much, much more difficult to heal. If we imagine that Israel would have been exposed to an earthquake and the same amount of people were killed, it wouldn't have been so poisonous as we are now in the situation where we have to face the fact that these terrorists are happy with what they did, and that they call their mothers to tell them how many children and how many Holocaust survivors they killed, and send them pictures, and the mothers are proud of their deeds. That's very difficult to face. The fact that you understand that they hate you, and that they will do everything not only to kill civilians and soldiers, but they have fun doing it. It makes it very difficult to recover from it. Okay, watching evil, facing evil is really making it much more complicated.
Yeah, I appreciate that the levels of trauma that we're experiencing here really are multiple. So there's the October 7th evil that people saw and experienced. There is the hostage situation as a result of that. There is an active war where 1 degree separation for most Israelis, their own family members, for you all and on this panel, and for many Israelis, only 1 degree removed, are in Gaza, are fighting on the front. People are not sleeping because of sirens going off on a regular basis, even in the center part of Israel. All of these on top of each other. On top of that is a sense sometimes of additional abandonment and isolation. And let's be, I want to add it to the discussion here, because we've seen in the United States, in Europe, and elsewhere, even with attempts to publicize and share the plight of the hostages. For example, the peripheral battles that are taking, the propaganda battles that are taking place with some of those signs being ripped down and ripped off, etc. And many people feeling like they're not even being allowed to grieve. They're not even being allowed to suffer their trauma with some degree of dignity. Maayan, I'm curious what you're seeing and hearing and feeling again from here in the United States, and people who are witnessing and experiencing that, and how they are sharing, and in what ways they're sharing, how that is impacting on their own mental health, and the kind of services that NATAL provides, in these kind of circumstances.
I will share that many of the donors that we have been speaking with, they reach out to us because someone from their community was a lone soldier that had just come back and is trying to process the trauma of losing half of his team. So the community reaches out with the understanding that NATAL is there to provide the services, but also to share the experience which brought them to, recognize that this nonprofit. So that's one type of conversations we have with donors. I also have many donors that call and are just concerned about the rise of anti-Semitism in the US and how it's affecting them personally, and how they firmly believe that treating the trauma for the long term will help build the resilience that we're so desperately in need of once we sort of step out of this phase that we're in. We're still in the trauma. We don't know what's happening, and we're being fed by the news. So certainly the donor outreach has been both from personal experiences that people have had and recognizing the importance of the work.
Emmy, you sort of got at this in the beginning, even in describing what everyone has come to understand, that this is an unprecedented moment. It's not going away, and the repercussions, the ripples from the trauma will continue for months and years for many people. Have you yet been able to take a step back to think about with the staff what kind of growth and expansion, or how to train? We have a question from one of our viewers about training volunteers and whether I know in the past there have been teams of NATAL sent to other parts of the world that have done trainings, etc. Can you share a little bit of what your early thoughts are on what are the implications already for the kind of growth and demands for your work?
Yes, thank you for this question. First of all, I just want to clarify, I'm doing my share of being the chair of NATAL as a volunteer. And I'm bringing a lot of experience from running one of the biggest ministries in Israel. When I left it, I had 7,000 employees. I had 40 different units across the country. I had a 3 billion shekel budget, and actually I am in charge of thinking, for years to come about the strategy of NATAL. And the strategy is not, I must admit, because we have an amazing CEO, Efrat Shaput, and she's been really running this emergency situation from the first moment in a very capable way. I think that my first thoughts from the very beginning, from Sunday, were how to expand, how to bring new methods, because it was quite clear even before, for example, we realized that we are going to have about 200,000 people who are displaced from their homes, some of which are incapable of returning because their home will burn down, but others because they are so close to the borders in the north and in the south, that we understand that if this war is going to continue for a few months and the missiles are continuing to fall every day, they will not return. So the questions that we are asking ourselves are, first of all, trying to understand how in the immediate to give our services differently, to prioritize differently, to understand how to spread the knowledge, not only to treat, the individuals, but also how to bring new approaches, new methods, how to bring technology. How just today, I can't elaborate on this, but we had a meeting with a top psychiatrist in Tel Aviv who has developed, together with a startup entrepreneur, a new method of trying to treat PTSD that will enable us, if it works, not to need the direct treatment of a professional, but something that can help the classic treatment, but be attended by people who are not trained as therapists. You have to understand that in everyday life, there aren't enough therapists in Israel for the regular needs. There won't be enough therapists. Also the training is very long. It takes many, many years to treat everyone individually. So NATAL is going to map, we're starting a strategic process along with one of the biggest firms in the field that has the generosity and the initiative to offer this to us as a donation. So we can think and, first of all, explore the world, understand what has been done in other places that have experienced this type of crises, you mentioned, other countries. Right now, there are countries that we have supported in the past years. We have supported the Ukraine, thanks to a very generous donation that Michal Herzog, our president's wife, and Yelena Zelensky brought. 28 professionals came from Ukraine to be trained in Israel and to learn how to build an infrastructure in Ukraine, and then trained from afar through Zoom, through webinars, through e-learning. For the past year and a half, it was quite unfortunate to realize that now they are calling us to see how we are and if we need their support. But it just shows us that everything that is developed by Natal in Israel is helpful to victims of terror and war across the world. So also in terms, of people who are donating and are more focused on their own communities, they have to understand that everything that is serving the Israelis will be adapted and is adapted, as a matter of fact, in other communities across the world, especially in the US and in Europe. But we are trying to find new ways of treating at scale. We have already developed models because our people were on the ground at the hotels with the displaced families. For example, at the Dead Sea hotels, there are right now 12,000 people from different places, not necessarily from one town, from Sderot and from the kibbutzim and from other places. And one of our leaders, one of our managers, was there in the first week trying to develop a new system of attending their mental health needs on the ground, while the Ministry of Social Affairs was still trying to figure out what are they supposed to do, who is willing to drive to the Dead Sea, which is quite far from the headquarters of the ministry in Jerusalem. Natal was there and was capable to find a system and to build a method that could be transmitted to the government after 3 weeks and could be duplicated in other hotels across the country where we have large groups of displaced families. By the way, in Eilat, the southern city of Eilat, who has 60,000 inhabitants, they are hosting 60,000 displaced citizens. The city has doubled its size. So you can imagine that we are trying, we're also present in Eilat. We're trying to think what is on the ground, what is the infrastructure that can support us, and how we can bring knowledge from afar, and who should we attend first? Should we support the children? Should we support the teachers? Should we run a case management of a family and maybe go through that way? This is what we have, really the most amazing professionals in Natal. And like Rivka said, they have not only a world recognition in their academic achievements, they also have the modesty to say, this is the first time we're about to do this. Let's think together. Let's bring about the experience that we have, what we learned from colleagues abroad, what we will be, brought in by our strategic work, and try to remodel the systems in Israel. We have to understand, that's the last thing I'm going to say. Until October 6th, the Israeli Ministry of Health thought that mental health is a privilege, it's like a bonus, it's like the cream on top of a cake. It's not the basics of survival. I think that everybody understands that mental health is one of the basics in order to rehabilitate Israeli society and enable people to wake up in the morning and go to work, enable people to wake up in the morning and attend other people's needs, just to survive within their families with all the stress of living in a hotel room for months. This all depends on mental health. So this is our challenge. I don't have answers to all the questions, but we are definitely exploring new methods, new technologies, and I'm sure that we will find them. Of course, we need money for this. I'll just say that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're going to put up,
I just want to say the plans in Natal right now are not for the next year. We understand that the type of commitment for the rehabilitation of people after that kind of trauma means that we have to plan 3 years ahead at least. And we have to invest in a way that we can give support that will not end after 1 year, because it will be useless. So this is one of our challenges, definitely.
Thanks for sharing that. I did want to try to get one more question in to Professor Tuval Mashiach. The scale of this many Israeli troops in active combat, having been mobilized, is not something Israeli society has had to deal with on the after effects. And I'm curious just how you envision, in the coming months, the needs of all of these returned veterans of an actual war, and the kind of services that are going to be required around the country, even with that cautionary note from Emmy about the healthcare system. The military has a different kind of infrastructure and additional resources. And what do you think that's going to look like for Israeli society to begin to deal with those kind of traumas in a systemic way?
So as you said, yes, we are prepared for at least a portion of the returning vets, the returning soldiers, to need professional help. And even if they will get it from the Ministry of Defense, their families are not always cannot always get these services. And NATAL works hand in hand with the Ministry of Defense, and sometimes we give the envelope for the families, or for the wives, or for the mothers. That's one. The second thing that I want to mention, maybe it's a good time to mention it, because I want to mention the word resilience. Not everybody who's going to come will be post-traumatic veteran. And post-trauma is very, very difficult to cope with, and it needs treatment. But not everybody will develop post-trauma. And it's important to mention it towards the end, because I want to say the Israeli society is resilient, and we never speak about 100% of post-traumatic people that will need help. We do have a good capability of recovery. And part of it is what Maayan and Amy spoke about, the solidarity, the sense of volunteering that we see, people donating blood, people donating money, people going to help with whatever is needed in the hotels, with the evacuated people. The Israeli society is resilient as a society. It doesn't mean we won't have to develop services, and we will need large amounts of professionals to help everybody who will come back from the war and in need. And if I may say one last thing, is that I think NATAL is specializing in really identifying new needs. For example, after a week, we got phone calls from Israelis who live outside of Israel, okay, who said, we need help. We know we are not in Israel now, but we have our sons and daughters in the Israeli military as lone soldiers. And we are, if you're afraid, we are afraid more, because we don't have this solidarity where we live. And some people cope with PTSD from previous wars. So we developed a response to that. We trained Israeli therapists who live abroad, and they started to work with Israeli communities. But that's a need that emerged from bottom up. So NATAL is really identifying the emerging needs and tries to respond to it. And now we developed another response to Jewish communities abroad, not Israelis, but Jewish communities in general that cope with anti-Semitism, and we trained Jewish therapists to start working with these communities. So it's like a ripple, on the other hand, of developing resiliency.
Emmy, Rivka, Mayan, thank you, and to all of your colleagues who are doing such incredible work on behalf of Israeli society. And we wish you only strength in your efforts. I know Mayan has put some contact information on how our viewers can follow up afterwards and to support the organization and to learn more. We're grateful to have you on today at this really challenging moment, and wish you both hatzlacha and safety in your own families and all your colleagues doing this critical work.
We want to thank you as well, but also to remind us the last sentence that we are expecting to bring all of our hostages home now. So please don't miss an opportunity to raise awareness to those who are not with us and are in Gaza. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that. We want to remind everyone, as a program note, we're back again this coming Sunday for our next program, November 5th, a program on reimagining education during the war. We'll be looking at a fascinating technology project that has had to make a very quick pivot with the Athena Fund's Magic Box, which is being used as a way also to treat and deal with education that has been disrupted both for families and for individual students. So come back and join us again on Sunday. Everybody have a safe week, and all of you, we wish you a lehitraot.